Ile-Balkhash district is located in the north of Almaty Region and includes the Sarıyasık Atırau Desert and Taukum Sands, as well as several South Balkhash aquatic ecosystems. The total area of the district is 37,000 square kilometers, that is, it is 7,000 square kilometers larger than Belgium. 30,000 people live in the area, which makes it approximately 1 person per 1,000 square kilometers. For comparison, the average population density on the planet Earth exceeds 50 persons per 1 square kilometer, and in China this figure averages 138 persons per square kilometer. Of course, people live unevenly throughout the globe, and the Balkhash area is no exception. Most of the villages and farms are concentrated along the Ili River and its branches. Whereas near water, all agricultural land was distributed among farmers and farms a long time ago, only a few are willing to take care of land in the desert. Yet, is the desert as lifeless as it may seem at first glance? Scientists have estimated that the impact of wild animals, such as gazelles, on desert ecosystems is much smaller than that of domestic animals. They are evenly distributed across the area, move for long distances, and practically don't trample desert vegetation. This means that a unit of area of desert ecosystems can sustainably feed a much larger biomass of wild ungulates than of domestic ones. If managed rationally, wildlife resources can become of great value. Today, as part of the inspection group, we will travel through the desert to get acquainted with one of the most beautiful representatives of Kazakhstan's fauna, the sylphlike Kara-Kuiruk, as they call the Black-Tailed Gazelle or Dzheiran in Kazakh in the Great Steppe. We will cross the largest desert of Almaty Region and make a quick tour of the Ile-Balkhash State Nature Reserve to get acquainted with the Ili River wetlands.
Так вот, находимся на территории Балхашского района, на въезде поселок Баканас.
We are entering the village of Bakanas in Balkhash district. According to the order of Almaty Regional Territorial Forestry and Wildlife Inspection, we are going on a raid to protect the Dzheiran.
Бүгінгі біздің рейтіміз қазір жоспарлап отырмыз 2 күнге не 3 күнге созылады.
We plan the raid to take 2 to 3 days. We intend to cover about 400 kilometers. Our main tasks are poaching prevention as well as animal world monitoring.
Жұмыстар жүргізу үшін ары қарай жұмыстарымызды жалғастырамыз.
Acquainted gazelle is the only representative of the gazelle genus living in Kazakhstan. It is found in desert and semi-desert regions of Central Asia, Transcaucasia, Iran, Afghanistan, and Western Pakistan. Recently, due to the intensive development of deserts by humans, their number has been declining across all of its habitats.
Предполагаемый наш рейд будет проложен маршрут.
The raid will follow the ecological corridor from the Altyn-Emel National Park to the Ile-Balkhash Reserve. We will scan the route for potential poaching sites. Dzheiran is a Red Book listed animal and killing it is a criminal offense. What is the amount of damage and the fine imposed in such cases? According to the base rates, the damage of illegal Dzheiran hunting up until very recently amounted to 400 monthly calculation indexes. Since January 2017, as per the code amendments, due to the fact that this is a red-listed animal, the damage amount was increased 3 times. So to date makes up 1,200 monthly calculation indexes for one animal.
Получается 1200 месячных расчетных показателей.
Dzheiran or Great Gazelle is included in the Red Book of the International Union for Conservation of Nature as a rare and endangered species. It has been in the Red Book of Kazakhstan since its inception in 1978. It's hard to say what was the actual number of Dzheirans prior to zoological research, but apparently it was quite high. Separate accounts by travelers indicate seeing gazelle herds of thousands of heads. The first systemic scientific counts were carried out in the mid-30s of the last century. At that time, the scientists had determined the Dzheiran population in Kazakhstan at about 200,000 animals. Unfortunately, by the late 70s, it started to rapidly decline. At the time of listing the Dzheiran in the Red Book, experts estimated their number in Kazakhstan at 10,000 heads. Good news is that recently their number has started to slowly increase. Dear citizens of Kazakhstan, we all have the duty of protecting our nature and passing it on to future generations in the state in which we had received it from our ancestors. Nature protection is in our own hands. The tasks of the Forestry and Wildlife Inspection include not only administrative control over compliance with environmental legislation, but also environmental awareness raising among the public.
Сейчас вот, пользуясь случаем, хочу обратиться к жителям нашей республики.
Seizing this opportunity, I would like to appeal to all the residents of our republic, to you, my distinguished fellow citizens. As a state inspector, I want to ask you not to poach for Dzheirans. If any one of you wants to satisfy his or her emotional or aesthetic needs, there are other, licensed and thus legal types of hunting.
На которых выдается определенный лимит, квоты имеются.
The current regional center of Balkhash district, Bakhanas village, emerged on the banks of the Ili River as a waterway station in the early 20th century. From it to Stary, or old in English Ilisk, located where today the town of Kapchagai is, self-propelled barges transported goods and passengers. From a bird's-eye view, it's clearly visible that close to Bakhanas there are dry Ili River beds forming the ancient river delta. Hundreds of years ago, the Ili River had changed its course and turned 200 kilometers to the west. There are different hypotheses explaining the reasons for it. According to one of them, it was the Mongols who turned the Ili River to force the defenders of fortresses that stood on the riverbank then to surrender. The army of Genghis Khan conquered Jetisu in 1216. As per archaeological excavations at Aktam and Karamegan fortresses, at that time the caravanserais and fortifications along the Ili River banks were in their prime. Yet the layers of the 14th century contain no signs of urban life. So could it be that the Mongols possessed the necessary technological capacity to turn large rivers in the Middle Ages? Most modern researchers tend to believe that the river had changed its course due to natural and geographical reasons. Floodplain rivers of Central Asia carry from the mountains a lot of silt, sand and clay suspension which accumulates in estuaries forming alluvial deposits. Gradually, alluvial cones grow larger and prevent water flow, so rivers just find a detour. Historically, in the course of the past 2,500 years, the water level fluctuation amplitude in Balkhash has exceeded 12 meters. The lake rose and sank several times, and the rivers draining into it also repeatedly changed their course. It inevitably affected the livelihood of people who lived in their floodplains and on the coast of Lake Balkhash. From the 2nd century BC to the 16th century AD, several branches of the Great Silk Way passed through the land of Jetisu. Apparently, caravans crossed the Ili River precisely on the section between the modern-day Bakhanas village and the town of Kapchagai. In the area of Tamgali, thousands of cave drawings dated from different eras are still preserved. The Buddha image of the 17th century was restored in the 70s of the last century for making movies. Now, this is a popular tourist destination. In the 80s of the last century, an archaeological expedition led by academician Karl Bypakov found out that the ancient population of Akhtam, Agash Ayak and Kara-Kuiruk used the Ili River water for irrigated agriculture. Today, looking at salt marshes, sand dunes and saxaul thickets, it's hard to believe that once upon a time lush green gardens rustled here. Today we're going not on an archaeological expedition but on a conservation raid. Still, our route almost coincides with the ancient caravan trail. The fact is that an ecological corridor stretches from the Altynamel National Park to the Ile-Balkhash Nature Reserve, along which not only merchants with goods had moved for thousands of years, but also wild animal herds migrated and still do. This form of a specially protected area is designed to allow animals to freely exchange genetic potential throughout the range. Fragmentation of wild animal habitats can lead to genetic depletion. The largest part of this eco-corridor lies within the Sarı-Yeşik-Atırau Desert. Since these edges are absolutely deserted, there is no competition between wild and domestic animals. Here, mere establishment of proper protection against poachers is enough to restore the former goited gazelle abundance. Not far from Bakhanas, on the left bank of the Ili River, there is a rice-breeding irrigated massive exceeding 30,000 hectares. The water intake canals were built using archaic technologies, even for the last century. That is, they are all earthen, without tile or concrete lining. Flowing along the earthen canals, the water seeps into the ground, evaporates and partially drains into the ancient Shet Bakhanas bed. Only 1/3 of it returns to the Ili via discharge channels. During the high agricultural season, the annual water intake for rice farming from the Ili River reaches 1 cubic kilometer. In recent years, this volume has dwindled by 1/3. We are leaving the floodplain Tugay woods and rice fields behind to delve into the saxaul thickets. In Sarı-Yeşik-Atırau, there are two saxaul species, black and white. On the outside, they are quite similar, although black saxaul appears a little darker. Carefully looking at white saxaul branches, you can notice small leaves resembling scales. If you see a dense saxaul forest on salt marsh soil, it's probably black saxaul, as white saxaul prefers sandy, slightly saline soils. Saxaul is an excellent fuel, so its mass harvesting greatly damaged saxaul forests. The tree grows really slow. Individual black saxaul trees can reach 4 meters in height, but it takes them at least 70 years to grow so tall. Young saxaul twigs serve an excellent food for Dzheirans. In the saxaul bush, a family of northern shrikes has arranged a nest. The parents are a little concerned about unprecedented two-legged creatures invading their individual plot, but they are courageously guarding the offspring sitting on the nearby desert candle. Why not taking a bite in the process? These scarlet lily beetles are so tasty. Here is another resident of saxaul forests, steppe agama. Magnifying it several thousand times, it's a real dragon. Agama's ancestors had appeared during the Mesozoic, around the same time as dinosaurs, but these tiny swift lizards turned out to be much more successful on the evolutionary arena than their giant relatives. The road goes up to the dry Ile-Balkhash riverbed. About 150 kilometers before its mouth, the ancient river began to branch out into distributaries, forming a vast delta. In the 9th-12th centuries AD, the terrain here was quite different from what we see today. Then there were well-moistened steppes and floodplain forests here, filled with tigers, wild boars, roe deer and bukhara deer. Looking around carefully, you can still detect the traces of ancient irrigation installations near the dried-up riverbeds. Water had left here many centuries ago, but along the ancient canals the water table is still rather high. The small groves of the desert poplar or turanga are a good evidence of this. In the first half of the 19th century, exploring the interflow of the Amba and Kumar rivers, naturalist Carl Ernst von Baer described tall, parallel and uniform-shaped sand dunes stretching for tens of kilometers from east to west. In his honor, these sand formations are now called the Baer Hills. Mixing with ancient river clay deposits, sand can form fairly stable ridges following the direction of dominating winds. It's not by accident that they call Dzheiran Kara-Kuiruk, or literally a black tail. Sensing danger, a Dzheiran lifts its tail vertically up like a signal missile. Attention all! Danger! Run for your life! Seeing the black tail upright, even a young and still ignorant Dzheiran knows what to do. Run at the top of your speed. In fact, they can go as fast as 60 km per hour. Fast legs and the ability to endure thirst are the key Dzheiran's competitive advantages that the evolution gave them, preparing these animals for the harsh desert life. After humans, the main Dzheiran's enemy is the wolf. Yet wolves, especially the nursing females, need to drink every day. Dzeirans, on the contrary, can afford going without water for a long time and quenching their thirst with dew and plant juice. Thus, in the most dangerous period for the youngsters, Dzeirans hide from predators in waterless places. To develop a strategy for protecting themselves against wolves and other predators, Dzeirans had hundreds of thousands of years. Unfortunately, the most ruthless predator, the Homo mechanicus, the mechanized human, had appeared unexpectedly without giving animals any time to come up with an effective protection strategy against jeeps, long-range guns, and electric light. Killing Dzeirans with the help of headlight is one of the most detestable ways of poaching. In cold blood, the poacher shoots the animal caught amidst bright light, leaving it no chance of escape. After the criminal code had provided for imprisonment of up to 6 years for this crime, the number of these willing to kill rare gazelles grew significantly smaller. We are approaching a wintering camp. At present, nobody lives here. Cattle breeders bring their livestock herds here only in October. A female Dzheiran is grazing near the hut and looking at us with interest. That's a really good sign. It is not scared, which means that people in these ends don't bother Dzeirans too much. An experienced inspector can accurately determine the scale of the poaching stress based on the behavior of wild animals. Where animals are often chased after, merely noticing a human they rush away in panic, not stopping for a second. Sex-wise, it's very simple to distinguish females from males. The latter have large lyre-shaped horns and the former have small horns or lack them altogether. It's quite possible that this female's calf is hiding somewhere nearby. The glade around the hut has overgrown with desert candles and is trampled down with Dzheiran tracks. In locations where they set up salt gardens for livestock, the soil is rich with nitric acid and ammonia salts. Nitrophilous vegetation, which Dzheirans love for some reason, grows in abundance in such places. Here last year the shepherds had left salt on one side and water on the other. Animals approached exactly the salt, and there are almost no tracks around the water. Therefore, it remains a mystery for us where they get their water in these sands. No tracks around the water, only around the salt. Are you saying they chose salt before water? Yes, exactly. We found no Dzheiran tracks around the water. Once again, this confirms the fact that Dzeirans concentrate around such wintering sites with wells. They are always somewhere around. Indeed, although there hasn't been any water in the well for a long time, the sand around it is trampled with Dzheiran tracks. Guys, I propose to drive another 10 kilometers to hit a couple more wintering sites. After inspecting them, it will be high time for us to choose a place for the camp tonight. In southern Mongolia, German scientists conducted research of Dzeirans using satellite trackers and found out that acquainted gazelles can go as far as 10 kilometers every day to get water. It's about 50 kilometers to the closest water source from where we are now. Is it possible that they can regularly cover such large distances or stay without water for such a long time? In fact, the ecology and behavior of Dzeirans in Kazakhstan has not yet been studied sufficiently. The emergence of new technologies, such as satellite tracking collars, will allow Kazakhstani scientists to learn more about these animals.
Dzheiran, которого мы встречали на пути нашего маршрута, очень далеко.
The Dzeirans that we encountered along this route were very far from water sources.
Удивительно то, что, зная белый...
Just imagine, 40, maybe 50 kilometers away. It's just amazing that despite the fact that biology tells us that Dzeirans must have at least some water, in this area we see that at this time of the year, it's actually not so.
находятся на таком расстоянии вместе
They can survive being really far from water bodies.
тоже на больших расстояниях от водопоя.
This female Dzheiran appears not very happy about us being here. Dzeirans are very prolific and under favorable conditions quickly regain their quantity. Female Dzeirans reach puberty at the age of 7 months and males in the second year of life. Some females bring offspring already at the age of 1 year. The latter may have 1 or 2 babies, less often 3, with a record number of 4. According to literature, in the 70s of the last century, a 3,000-head Dzheiran population roamed the sands of the Sarıyasık, Atırau and Taukum.
Мен осы табиғат қорғау саласында 17 жылдан аста қызмет атқардым.
I have been working in nature conservation for over 17 years now. As a rare species, Dzheiran is listed in our Red Book. In the 90s, their number dropped drastically. Recently, we have been seeing a positive trend. The Dzheiran population has been slowly growing.
Бүгінгі күнге саны артып келе жатыр.
The desert only seems monotonous. In fact, in the course of only 3 days we've been to several different landscapes with different flora and fauna composition. Dzeirans are also unevenly distributed across their habitat. You can drive 100 kilometers through the desert and not see a single gazelle. And then within an area of several tens of square kilometers, you can encounter dozens of them. Jointly with the scientists of the Institute of Zoology of the Ministry of Education and Science of Kazakhstan, the experts of the Ile-Balkhash Nature Reserve's Science Unit are investigating the peculiarities of the territorial distribution of Dzheirans, their migration routes, behavior and nutrition. The project is carried out with the support of the World Wildlife Fund and the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Local communities play a great role in preserving the rare gazelle. Scientific studies and conservation measures will not yield any results if the bulk of the population don't support these efforts.
За время нашего оперативного рейда
In the course of this operational raid along the right and left banks of the Ili River, we covered over 500 kilometers, including through the sands of the Sarıysık-Atırau and Taukum deserts. During this time, we encountered over 100 Dzheirans and even one wolf.
также видели одну особь волка.
As we approach Lake Balkhash, the landscape is changing. Beyond the village of Kara-Kuiruk, where the base of the Ile-Balkhash Nature Reserve is located, Saxol forests give way to the endless sea of reeds and tugai thickets. Here and there, pheasants, typical floodplain forest inhabitants, run crossing the road. Muskrats can be encountered at almost every lake. In the 30s of the last century, this fur animal was brought here from Canada and appears to feel quite well in the Balkhash area. We are entering the premises of the Kara-Kuiruk Reserve. Adil Jumagulov and Fakat Nolekanuli, Ile-Balkhash Reserve state inspectors, will tell us about the operations of the reserve's protection unit. We are switching cars for boats.
На данный момент территория очень большая. Именно территория резерва.
The current reserve's area is very large. The reserve's border goes east of the village of Kara-Kuiruk, plus we have 3 more sections within the limits of the Kara-Kuiruk State Reserve. In addition, 2 other state reserves, Balkhash and Kara-Kuiruk, were also transferred under our operational control, which means we're responsible for their protection as well. I mean poachers and fires. Were there many fires this year? We had 2. To fight fires, the inspectors have 2 fire engines at their disposal. But the problem is that no vehicle can go through the river's delta section. Too much water in reeds. In addition, fire spreads in reeds with the speed of light. Every fire kills thousands of wild animals. So the only truly effective way of combating fires is the high civic responsibility of the area's residents as well as tourists. Fire setting on the territory of the reserve is a criminal offense plus a large fine. We have a little problem with fires because there are many country houses around and their owners every once in a while set the old reeds on fire. Do they get punished for doing so? Yes, of course. How do you prove it? They can always say it wasn't them. Last year our colleagues detained a couple of them. 2 criminal cases were initiated against them. The Kara-Kuiruk Integrated Reserve was created almost half a century ago to protect natural wetland ecosystems, primarily the nesting locations of rare waterfowl. For instance, curly and pink pelicans nest in the delta of the Ili River. Unfortunately, there are cases when poachers hunt pelicans for their beaks, which resellers from a neighboring country buy for souvenirs.
Если будут лица задержаны,
Pelicans are also listed in the Red Book of Kazakhstan. If people are detained for illegal pelican hunting, they will face criminal charges under Article 337 of the National Criminal Code. The Ili River Delta splits into hundreds of streams, forming a maze of lakes and islands. The only way to move around is by boat, and even so you will not be able to reach all its corners. Without a map and a GPS, an unprepared person can easily get lost in these parts. Until the end of the 20th century, civilization bypassed these places. Only several muskrat hunters and fishermen would come to these islands for a couple of months. When the hunting and fishing seasons were over, the delta became empty again. The islands were inhabited by tigers, countless herds of wild boars and roe deer. The 20th century brought storm-like and not always positive changes to the delta's life. Commercial fishing stopped a long time ago, but the Balkhash area became a rather popular fishing destination. One by one, fishing camps started emerging. On the one hand, touristic use of natural resources is considered more rational and environmentally friendly than fishing. After all, sport fishermen pay most of their money not for fish, but for accompanying services, providing local residents with employment and local district budget with tax payments. Yet, even recreational load has to be limited. To regulate these processes, the Ile-Balkhash Nature Reserve was established in 2018. Its structure includes the reserve core with surrounding protection zones of the Kara-Kuiruk and Balkhash reserves. In order to stimulate resource-efficient types of nature use, a small grants program was launched for local residents.
Мы находимся в самом центре Илийской дельты, на рыболовной базе, которая тоже называется...
We are now in the very center of the Ili Delta, at a fishing camp also called Delta. This is a very convenient, strategic place. From here we will go on radial tours in various directions and get acquainted with the area's wildlife. We'll also talk to local residents, these who live and work here on a permanent basis, with rangers and inspectors who use this camp as their base. This Turanga Grove on the island is artificial. They started planting it 16 years ago simultaneously with the launch of the camp construction. The first saplings gave good shoots that spread in a vegetative way, and now the small island has become lush with nice green trees. The main objective here is to protect the grove from spring fires. The restoration of Tugay forests within the limits of the protection zone is one of the main tasks of the reserve, because it is inseparable from the increase of the number of ungulates, wild boars, roe deer and Tugay deer. Tiger, which occupies the top of the trophy pyramid, should soon become the indicator of the well-being of Tugay ecosystems. That is why the Republic of Kazakhstan, with the support of the World Wildlife Fund, is taking significant conservation efforts in the area. The logic is simple. If there are tigers, then everything is fine with the quantity of hoofed animals. If everything is fine with the ungulates, then their habitat is in good condition as well. A harmonious integration of local residents in the environmental processes and ensuring their comfortable life together with nature remains a priority issue of sustainable ecosystem management. Our our acquaintance with the Delta's animal world began right in the camp's dining room. A marten colony appeared to like the camp's roof.
Сначала рыболовная база только была, а потом начали разводить птицу.
At first, there was only a fishing camp here, and then they began to breed fowl like geese and ducks. Since there is a lot of free space here, enough water and grass, we can do it no problem. So our guests can enjoy eco-friendly food. Initially, we bred them only for cooking food for tourists, and now we have increased our number. We have 700 geese and 300 ducks. We want to try producing them for sale. Valery, could you show us around? I see some pretty young ladies working for you. They are tourists who came here with children. Kids just love it. Vika, what are you feeding them with? It's watermelon. I didn't know they ate watermelons. Melons also.
Ребята с корой работают.
We have a couple of guys from Kara-Kuiruk village. They work as guides and help us with the farm if they have free time. There was a little emergency here. Somebody got in through the roof and ate 2 ducklings last night. We need an investigation. We have only 2 suspects, either a spotted cat or a weasel. The spotted steppe cat is often mistakenly called the reed cat. In fact, they don't live in the Balkhash area, and wild spotted cats are quite common, even numerous. Spotted cats are still unaware that soon they will come face to face with their distant relative. The cat's and tiger's DNA coincide by about 95%. Evolutionarily, they diverged about 4 million years ago. In the course of that time, the tiger grew big in size and the spotted cat in quantity. It turns out that from the evolution point of view, being large and strong isn't always beneficial. The camp has enough modern motorboats, but we want to travel to places where a motorboat will not get you. To do this, we found an antique kayak probably used by hunters and fishermen of the last century in the reeds, and will try giving it a second life. What we need is just a bit of oakum, petroleum tar and patience. Well, our vessel looks just great and ready for adventures. It doesn't feel very reliable, but our grandfathers somehow used to move around on such flotation devices, right? In any case, we'll give it a try. After all, a fascinating journey to the world of reedy and marshy banks is awaiting us. It is inhabited by dozens of strange creatures, about which we in fact know so little. Don't miss our next episode to see it all with your own eyes.